If we have another look at the recipes in the OK-HTTP documentation, we recall that we are currently using this synchronous get recipe in our code. With some additional knowledge now about threads, concurrency, and asynchronous processing, we'll want to switch to this other recipe, the asynchronous get. Notice here in the description that it will download a file on our worker thread and get called back when the response is readable. Let's update our code to be more like this asynchronous model, and then we'll talk about this callback idea. So let's head back to Android Studio. And main activity, we'll close the log. So inside onCreate, we can keep a lot of our code the same. The first difference is here. The response equals call.execute. This is the synchronous method. We can delete that now. So let's ignore this try-catch block just for a moment, and here under where our call is initialized, we want to add a new line to use the asynchronous method, enqueue. So call enqueue. Notice the parameter for this method is a callback object. Type in new callback and hit enter to generate the callback. Isn't autocomplete great? Well, sometimes. So this should look familiar. We have an anonymous inner class of type callback. It has two methods that we need to override, onFailure and onResponse. Fortunately, good naming conventions have been used here, making it easy to imagine what they're used for. Let's turn back to our try-catch block. We need to cut and paste it, but where to put it? Since we're checking in there about a successful response, it needs to go into the onResponse method. Fortunately, that method is called with a response parameter already, so we don't even need to change our code. So we'll cut our try-catch and put it here into onResponse. Our code is updated to make asynchronous calls, so let's try it out. And another error. Let's go into logcat and see what it says. So here we get a java.lang security exception, permission denied. Missing internet permission. Ah yes, we forgot to give permission for our app to use the internet. That's a common mistake, and can easily be fixed with a single permissions line in Android manifest.xml. So let's close down our logcat again. Go into manifest, Android manifest, and up here towards the top, do uses permission. We want Android permission internet. And close our tag. Great. And let's run our app again. Nice. No errors. And our emulator shows the default hello world. Let's take another look in logcat and see our data. And there it is. Awesome. We'll talk about this format of data called JSON in a little bit. If you're not getting the data displayed here, you may want to debug your code and execute it line by line to see what's happening. Maybe adding additional log statements inside the onResponse method would help. One common mistake is to have extra spaces, missing slashes, or forgetting a comma when we built the URL. So let's go back into main activity, close that down, and take a look here in our callback. What exactly is happening in our code here? The onQueue method executes the call, but does so by putting it into a queue. This queue is provided by OK-HTTP and executes the calls asynchronously in the order they are added to the queue. Since this is the only order in the queue, it gets executed right away. At that point, the call is executing in the background, and we are able to continue to execute code on the main UI thread like normal. We don't have any other code, but we could add another log statement down here. Let's go ahead and do that to see the order of the log statements. log d tag, and we'll do main UI code is running. Hooray! So if this were synchronous code, it would process through, log the response, and then log this new statement. But if we run our code now and look in logcat, we see that our statement is displayed before the response. This illustrates that the main UI thread keeps working while the background thread is still working. So what is a callback and how is it working? Callbacks are very common in Java and Android development. Asynchronous processing makes use of this because it's the communication bridge between a background worker thread and the main thread. What's happening is this. When we call the onQueue method, we're saying, hey, call us back when you're done. Here's how to do that. We can imagine we are giving the OK HTTP code a phone number to call us back on when they're finished getting data from the web. This callback is an object defined by the OK HTTP library. OK HTTP then says, okay, as long as you give me a correct callback object, I'll use it. When the call finishes in the background, the onResponse method of this callback object is called. Then, the code we write inside it will be executed. If there is an error, then the onFailure method will be called. This could be an instant later, or possibly a long time. Generally, there is a limit on network connections, but in theory, this background thread could run indefinitely. As I mentioned, we'll talk about the JSON data in a little bit. First, though, let's make our code more robust by handling potential errors.